During the month of July, I read a bunch of books, and most of them are 2024 new releases. So if you're curious, keep on watching. So hello my fellow fantasy book lovers, and welcome back to my channel. Or if you're new here, hi and welcome. My name is Kathy. I'm a bookworm from Belgium who loves to read fantasy books. In today's video, I want to talk about all of the books that I finished during the month of July. And there's a lot of them. I think there's 9, which even for me is a lot. This is almost double of what I usually read. The first book I actually finished is Ashes and the Star-Cursed King. This is the second book in the Nightborn duet and part of the World of the Crowns of Nyaxia by Carissa Broadbent. If you haven't read the first book, I'm not going to talk too much about the second one because it has a lot of spoilers if you haven't read the first one. I got this pretty special edition with the blade on the side of it. We follow more or less the same characters as in the first book. Again, I'm not going to talk too much about the details of this book. I might make a detailed video about the Crowns of Nyaxia books because there's 4 currently. At the moment of recording this video, I'm actually reading Slaying the Vampire Conqueror and I'm almost done. So then I will have read all 4 books that currently are out. This book, I didn't have any complaints about it. It follows on the first book. It takes a little bit of a different twist. Not gonna go into details. There is just one thing that I want to mention. There is a sentence that gets repeated over and over again to the point that it becomes annoying. So if you're gonna read this book, take a shot every time the mention is "there she is," because it's very frustrating at some points. So if you want to read this book, if you enjoyed Serpent and the Wings of Night, you will enjoy this one too. And if you didn't enjoy Serpent and the Wings of Night, then just don't read this one. And this book, of course, again, has an open ending hinting to things that can follow afterwards. But at this point, there isn't an actual confirmation that she will be continuing the plotline of these 2 main characters. Because there will be another series that is actually releasing end of this year, and it will follow one of the characters from the books as well that has been in both the first and the second one, and they are getting their entire separate duology written at this point. So very excited for that. I'm also super happy that I finally started reading Slaying the Vampire Conqueror. It took me so long because it's on hardcover and I don't have the e-reader version, because these ones I do have the e-reader version as well, and it just reads a lot faster for me. But hey, first book of the month that I finished, and I gave this a 4 stars because I did really enjoy it, but it wasn't my favorite book ever. Then we get into romantasy territory. After this very thick book, I just needed something easy, light and breezy, and I got That Time I Got Drunk and Yeeted a Love Potion at a Werewolf. I actually bought the first book and the second book together, and apparently there's a third one, so pretty soon I think I will be purchasing the third one as well. This is a very quick and easy romantasy book. There is a very strong romance line in this book. There's a lot of smut happening as well. The female main character is of colored skin. She is not like this petite, perfect blonde character. She has curves, she has a stubborn personality, she's not perfect, and that's what for me makes these books so much fun to read. If you want to read these books, I would recommend getting first the first one, then the second one, etc., because there's elements of the first book coming back in the second one. Not that it really matters in the plotline of the story, but it's just more fun if you know the backstory as well. So for me, at the time of reading, this was a 5-star read just because it's so much fun. It read so easily. It's a thin book as well. It's just very satisfying to read. The romance was good, the smut was good. There was another separate plotline happening in the book, like with some dark magic and stuff, which I also really liked. It was not too on the nose what was going to happen, so I really did enjoy this. But know that this is not like Shakespeare or anything. This is just a fun time in a book. After my light and easy read, I started reading The Revenant Games by Margie Fuston. This was recommended to me by Emily from Waterstones in Brussels, and Emily is amazing. She knows my taste, she knows I love vampires, so she recommended me this book. In this book we follow our female main character who actually has a sister, or had a sister, and they live together in this village, and this village is like on the border of a forest where on one side of the forest you have vampires and on the other side you have witches. witches. So this is like the middle ground, and humans are allowed to go into the forest like in the middle ground, but once they venture too much towards the vampire side, they might get attacked. And same thing to the other side, whenever they travel too close to the witches, they might get attacked and killed as well. Our main character feels like she doesn't really fit into their village. She's like very rebellious. She wants to go explore, but she's not allowed to because it's too dangerous, and she drags her sister with. At the very start of the book, something tragic happens to the sister, and to like get her sister back, our main character is going to participate in something which is called the Revenant Games. It's basically a trial between humans that have to make an alliance either with the vampires or with the witches or both, and like they have to get one of the vampires to the witches' coven or the other way around during this trial, and of course don't get killed. So our main character engages to participate in this trial, and that's the basic premises of this book. Our main character is not, to me, fully fleshed out enough that I related to them as much, and I also felt like they were putting a lot of importance on some things that I was like, just let go. But that's of course because this is a YA book. So I enjoyed this book. Was it my favorite read ever? Honestly, no. There were some interesting things happening, especially towards the end. I'm not gonna spoil any of that, but I really enjoyed it. It's just, it wasn't my favorite book ever. I just wished that the main character was fleshed out a little bit more and a little less annoying at times. And especially there is a second main character involved, or like a secondary character that is joining her. And I felt like that character got on my nerves so much, I would have just yeeted them out of the group from the start. And this is described as a paranormal romance, and I felt there was a little bit of romance in the book, but it's also not like the most fleshed out romantic scenes ever, because of course this is a YA book. So for me personally, this was a 3 stars read. If there ever comes out a second or a third book in this series, I may or may not pick it up. It depends on what direction they want to take with it, but overall it wasn't a bad read. Up next, we have the second book in the God Killer trilogy, which is called The Fallen Gods, if I'm not mistaken. So the first book is called God Killer, the second one is Sunbringer, which I have right here. This is the Fairy Loot Special Edition, so that's why it looks a little bit different than most of the books that you might have seen. We follow on the same story that we started in book 1, so if you haven't read book 1 yet, I'm not going to talk too much about the contents, but we just continue in the same world setting with gods that are seen as something bad by some people, and they try to rid the world of these gods. So we have our main character, or like one of the main characters that we follow is this god killer. She's called Kissen. And there's another main character who we follow, who is a younger girl who has a god attached to her, and they don't know how or why. And we will get a lot of explanations in book 2. And there is going to be a third book as well. Now, this book definitely had middle book syndrome. I didn't feel like it was the most interesting book that I've read. I did like it. So if you liked book 1, then just lower your expectations a little bit before you start reading book 2, because it was good, but it didn't have that same epic feeling as I personally had in book 1. So we're gonna see where they go with book 3. Maybe that goes in the direction that I would have hoped book 2 would take, but we'll see whenever that comes out. And I'm not sure if I've mentioned it, but this was a 3 stars for me. Up next, I want to talk about Apples Dipped in Gold by Scarlett St Clair. This is the second book in the fairy tale retellings that she's writing, and I don't have a physical copy because the physical copy is coming out later this year. However, the EPUB version, so the ebook, is already out, so I bought that one instead because I really wanted to read it directly. So this is again a mix of several fairy tales, as was the first book, Mountains Made of Glass. In the first book, we actually follow a story that is related to one of 7 Fae princes, and in the second book, we actually go on in the same realm, more or less, with a totally different story related to one of the other Fae princes. And I know there's a lot of people who don't like Scarlett St Clair's writing. I personally really enjoy it. And in this book, we follow an adult main character. She's already in her 20s, like very well in her 20s, and she's living together with 3 brothers who are very abusive towards her. She needs to do the household, make sure they are fed, etc., because they are the most important hunters of their village, and the forest in which they go hunt is actually cursed. There is fae and fairies and all sorts of creatures, so everyone who wanders into the forest either disappears except her brothers, so they are like the hunters of their village. Now in this story, she actually encounters someone on an evening where she's like very fed up with the entire abusive situation with her brothers, and that person immediately is like, I want to marry you, I will come and pick you up tomorrow. The brothers like immediately want to sell her to that person, so they demand like a very big like marriage money price for her. I'm not sure what the exact term is anymore, I'm very sorry. But then something completely different happens, and actually the main characters, the 2 main characters are not the people that you might expect from the start, which is nice. Well, of course, the female main character you will know from the start. There is someone who commented on a previous video of mine that was like, oh, but he's been pining over her for 7 years. Yes, she was already an adult when they met 7 years ago. She didn't know it was him at the time, and something weird happens, and you will get explanations for what actually happened 7 years ago. And you will notice that he's not just obsessed with this very young girl. No, they were both obsessed with each other. Something terrible happened, and now X amount of years later, they get reunited somehow. But it's like everything is written out so beautifully. I really enjoyed it. If you like fairy tales, twisted fairy tales, dark fairy tales with a splash of romance, then I think you will really enjoy this book. I personally really liked it. I'm very much looking forward to how the next books in this, I think, 7-part series will be, because I'm having a lot of fun with them, and they're short and easy reads. I think they're around 150 pages. So for me, that's like one evening/night, because once I get invested in these short stories, I tend to finish them. Hence why I have so many read books this month. Apples Dipped in Gold for me was a very fun read, a very easy read. I really enjoyed it, but it's not like the most literary masterpiece around, so I gave it a 4-star rating. Up next is a book that I found out through Elliot Brooks about. So if you don't follow Elliot Brooks yet, I would highly recommend checking out their YouTube channel. I love their content. We read in a similar style of books, but then still different. So this book is called The Fireborn Blade, and the way that she explained it was actually exactly the way it ended up being. It's about a female knight who wants to regain her status as a knight after a rejection, and she is therefore going to go kill a dragon to get the Fireborn Blade. That is exactly what this book does, and it is actually very cleverly written. So we have our main story, but every chapter is a little bit different. So we have the main story that we follow, of course, but not every chapter is a main story. We also have backstory of other knights who have in the past either tried to slay dragons. There's like writings from a book that are also discussed in here that talks about dragons and their lairs, and then there is a little bit of like jumping back and forward. So we get a little bit more backstory on our main character in some chapters as well. I personally really love this. If you love epic fantasy with like high stakes, because the stakes are high with dragons involved, this book was very good. It surprised me actually with how good it was, and I'm very much looking forward to a second book that is also coming out in this series, I think this year even. It is very short, so if you want a full story without having to spend 500 pages reading it, I think this one would be very good for you. So this book has magic, it has dragons, it has knights, it has a female knight, it has redemption, it has like the injustice between females and males being allowed or not being allowed to be a knight or be something else. And I gave this 4 stars. Up next we have a book that I was very much looking forward to. It is Someone You Can Build a Nest In. And when I was in Waterstones, I saw this book and I didn't recognize it, and I didn't like ring a bell whenever I was just looking at it. And then I got it recommended again by Emily from Waterstones. She's amazing. Whenever you go there, ask for Emily if you're into fantasy. She is the best. The cover for the book actually looks like this, if you look it up online. But this cover is deceptively bright and nice and airy. This book is one of the gorier books that I've read this year. We actually follow a shape-shifting monster who absorbs gore and bones and body parts and then forms them into her own shape or body. And it or she, it's described in a female way the most of the time of the book. She can shift into a feminine shape as well, like a humanoid shape, but then with a wig, and it's weird. So if you like gory fantasy, then I think you will love this. I personally had a little bit of a struggle when I was reading this book because it was a little bit too gory at times for me. And I'm usually not someone who's like afraid or scared of like held back by gory elements in books. But this one, the way some scenes were described, it was like, ugh. So yeah. Please know that before you start reading this book. So we follow this monster who awakens in their lair and they're being attacked by knights who want to reclaim the building that she's living in. So we follow this struggle from the monster's point of view, but of course we also understand the human's point of view who actually want to get rid of the monster. She actually goes to a village after this attack to find a victim to eat because she eats humans and animals, of course, to survive. And in the village, she actually gets seen and gets recognized by two of the survivors that she attacked in her lair, and they actually chase her away. During this chase, she falls off a cliff or like runs off a cliff, jumps off of it, and she gets saved by someone. And during the book, they actually start developing feelings for each other, these two characters. I'm not gonna tell too much about it because then it will spoil a big part of the story, but it's weird. That's all I can say about it. This book to me was particularly weird. If you like fantasy with a touch of horror in it, with a touch of gore in it, I think you will enjoy this. Personally, I'm not sure if I will ever read it again. It wasn't my favorite book. I did enjoy reading it at the time I was reading it, and the story was fun, but it's not one of my favorite books. So therefore, I'm giving this a 3 stars. Up next, we have A Court of Dragons and Ruin, another smutty romantasy read because I love mixing up my heavier reads with romantasy. This is book 4 in this series, so I'm not going to go too much into the contents of this book. However, if you're looking into reading the series, wait another few months because book 5 is coming out, I believe, in September, and then you will be able to finish the entire series at once. It actually starts in book 1 with a seemingly human girl who needs to participate in a sort of Hunger Games trial contest, because everything is described that way, to actually compete to become one of the new queens to one of the Dragon Kings. So the 4 Dragon Kings each have their own court. They are the Earth, Fire, Wind, and Water courts, and everyone has a different personality. And this is a why choose romance. So from the start, you know they will all end up together. I really enjoyed the first book. I really enjoyed the second book. But I feel like book 3 and book 4 are fillers. There's different elements thrown into the mix that don't really make sense to me. Especially in this book, there were some like problems or situations that I felt were resolved way too easily. I was like, okay, well, what? Where are the stakes? So my involvement in this series is not at all anymore into the main storyline. I honestly just want to smut. Let's not lie. I just want all of them to get together and do their thing because that will be enjoyable and it will make like a final conclusion, because there have been struggles between some of the characters. They haven't actually all been together at once. She hasn't been with everyone and involved and stuff. Like, some of the things happening in these books are very weird in my opinion, and they just constantly get pulled apart as a group, and for me that's a little bit frustrating. And then if the other plot lines don't really make sense to me, just meh. So that's why this book is a 3 stars, because it was just meh. And I truly hope that book 5 will be a satisfying conclusion to this series. And then the final book that I read is An Education in Malice by S.T. Gibson. I only recently, very recently, finished this book, so it's still fresh in my mind. And this is a dark academia setting. So we have this academic setup of 2 girls that both do poetry. There's 2 main characters that we follow. We have Laura Sheridan, who comes from this village, who is getting into this school for poetry. And then the second character is called Carmilla, and she's already in the school the moment moment that Laura arrives. She's like one of the higher classes, and they both get into this specific course with De La Fontaine, which is like a teacher with like super prestigious aspects about it. Now, I hadn't really looked into this book too much. I was just like, okay, I like the previous S.T. Gibson book that I read. I will probably enjoy this one as well. So consider me surprised when suddenly there was vampires in this book, and that made me love it even more. So if you're into dark academia mixed in with vampires, I could highly recommend this book. There's a bit of rivalry between the main characters, a little bit of romance sprinkled in there as well. Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I give this a 4-star rating. And apparently this is a retelling of the classic story Carmilla, but I haven't personally read that one yet. Hopefully somewhere in the future, so I can actually compare them. As always, I will be linking to all of the books mentioned in the description box of my video. Let me know if you've read one of these books as well. Which one have you read and what did you think about them? I would love to know. And of course, if there's anything else that you've read during the month of July that you really want to share with me, do so in a comment as well. Of course, feel free to give this video a big thumbs up if you liked it, and if you haven't already and you'd like to be, feel free to subscribe to my channel. I make new videos every week and would love to be here for every single one of them. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you very soon with a new video. Bye!